What is the most important thing you can do to increase your consistency in hitting forehands and backhands from the baseline? With this video, I will tell you what it is, and I will explain why it is so important. Welcome to Crosscourt Rabbit Complete Tennis. I'm your host, David Popeil, and my mission is to bring to you the most useful technical instruction as well as the most engaging information about tennis generally, including its history and even its oddities, and thereby significantly raise both your level of play and your enjoyment of every aspect of the greatest of all games. The most important thing you can do to increase your baseline consistency is simply this. Look through the contact point, the point where your racket meets the ball. This is the first of the laws of consistency that I referred to in the Ultimate Consistency Drill video that preceded this one. This is the first of the techniques you can test out while you're doing the Ultimate Consistency Drill. If you haven't viewed the video that explained that drill, a link below will take you to it. The drill is an excellent way of measuring your progress in hitting your ground strokes with greater consistency. An alternative way of stating the first law of consistency is this. Don't always watch the ball. That's right. You should not be keeping your eyes on the ball all the time, as many, if not most, recreational players have been told and believe. You should, of course, attentively follow the ball from your opponent's racket onto your racket. However, once the ball strikes your racket strings, forget about looking at it. Yes, that's right. Do not follow the ball with your eyes as the ball leaves your racket. Instead, what I want you to do is keep your head down and look through the contact point until your follow-through is at least halfway complete. It should look like this, though to make my point, I'm going to exaggerate the time I keep my head down and look through the contact point. What I do not want you to do is, immediately upon striking the ball, lift your head and look at the ball as it leaves your racket and heads towards the net, or even worse, lift your head and look at the other side of the net, both of which look something like this. The fact is, you can't actually see the ball strike your strings, not in the sense of being able to see something like a still frame image of the ball and racket at contact. The rebound simply happens too quickly. The most you could see is the blur of the ball in the moment it approaches, makes contact with, and then rebounds off the racket strings. And you will see it if you look through the contact point. Another benefit is that looking through the contact point keeps your head and therefore the vertical axis of your upper body steady, giving you a more stable axis around which your torso can rotate or turn, which is a vital element of modern ground strokes. There are still more benefits. Looking through the contact point increases the chance of making a contact in the center of the racket, the sweet spot. Moreover, when you're having one of those days, a day when you just can't get your game into gear, when nothing is going right and everything you try to raise your level of play fails, make sure you're looking through the contact point. If you haven't been, do it. It is one of the most reliable ways to turn things around on those days of utter frustration. Now, admittedly, I don't have scientific confirmation of the explanation I'm about to offer, but I think it makes sense. Looking through the contact point sends a more complete set of visual information to your brain, thereby increasing the specificity of the information that your brain sends back to your muscles, which in turn enables the minute last instant muscle reactions that must come into play if you are to center the ball on your racket, especially when you hit from an awkward position. And there is this. What is the point of looking at the ball after you've hit it? There's nothing more you can do to affect the ball's pace, placement, or spin. And don't worry that while your eyes are on the contact point rather than following the ball or looking at your opponent, you will lose track of the ball's direction or won't be able to see where your opponent is and what he or she is doing. In executing your own shot, you'll have a pretty good idea of where you're placing the ball. And the time between contact and the halfway point or even the near completion of your follow-through, that is to say, the moment when you look up, is very short. You'll have no problem seeing all you need to see in order to react to your opponent's next shot. And remember, you have peripheral vision, which will help you see much of what you need to see even before you lift your head and cast your direct gaze to the other side of the net. Remember, too, that you and the people you play are not hitting nearly as hard and fast as the pros hit. If they have time to look through the contact point, and as we'll shortly see, they do look through the contact point, you will too. One more thing that you don't have to worry about. Don't worry that continuing to look through the contact point after the ball leaves your racket will inhibit the shoulder and torso rotation that I mentioned earlier. We have necks. Necks allow our head and shoulders or torsos to rotate independently of each other. Thus, you can keep your head still and thereby look through the contact point after striking the ball while your shoulders and torso continue to rotate. Yes, there comes a point when your shoulders and torso rotate so much that you can no longer keep your head stationary with your eyes on the contact point. No problem. That point comes more than sufficiently after ball contact so as to enable you to look through the contact point just as I am urging you to do. So, do the pros do this? Do they actually take their eyes off the ball in order to look through the contact point? Well, to this I offer a qualified, you bet they do. Well then, you may ask, how come I never noticed them doing it? The answer is that at the pace the pros swing, it all happens too quickly. In real time, it looks like their eyes are always on the ball. To see that this is not the case, we have to resort to slow motion, which we will do now. As for the qualification I mentioned, I'll get to that a little later. Let's start with the player best known for the length of time after he strikes the ball that he keeps his eyes on that contact point rather than on the ball. And that player is, as you may well suspect, Roger Federer. So here is a slow motion look at Roger hitting his backhand. So, Roger keeps his eyes on the contact point of his one-handed backhand for a long time. Let's take a look at a two-handed backhand as illustrated by Rafael Nadal. Pay attention to how long Rafa looks through the contact point. And here is Novak Djokovic, hitting his backhand and looking through the contact point. On the forehand side, Serena Williams offers a terrific example. And still on the forehand side, here is a photo of Roger, again, showing his eyes on the contact point and his head unturned long after the ball is off his racket. Note how much his shoulders have turned while his head and eyes remain pinned on the contact point. Just how important is looking through the contact point? I'll put it this way. If I could only give you one tip, this would be it. In my experience, nothing makes a greater contribution to every aspect of a player's game than looking through the contact point. We're focusing on ground strokes here, but the same principle holds for every shot you hit for the rest of your playing days. Serves, overhead, drop shots, and yes, even volleys. So what about the qualification I mentioned earlier? Do all the pros look through the contact point all the time? Well, in spite of what I've said, the answer is no. Not all of them do it all of the time. Here I thank Nick Arakic of Intuitive Tennis, who points this out in one of his excellent instructional videos. Below you'll find a link to that video as well as a link to Nick's website. Now take a look at this video of Novak Djokovic hitting his forehand. Novak's head and eyes are not directed at the contact point. Instead, his head and eyes appear to lead the ball. Of course, earlier we watched Novak hit a backhand, and there, quite clearly, we saw him look through the contact point. So, if looking through the contact point is not a universal among the pros, and if an all-time great like Djokovic doesn't do it all the time, what should you do? I strongly advise that you look through the contact point on both sides, all the time. I cannot help but think that Novak Djokovic can afford to take his eyes off the contact point because he is an extraordinarily gifted athlete whose discernment is such that it can gather what it needs by extrapolation from a less than complete set of visual information. A final important note, and one that I wish I didn't have to convey. Though it may seem otherwise, looking through the contact point is not easy to do. If you're not already doing it, keeping your eyes on the contact point and not following the ball is difficult, especially so the longer you've been playing without doing it. So, to make things a bit easier, I offer this suggestion. Count. On the first point of the set or match, count to yourself silently or in a whisper each time you look through the contact point. If the first point requires 3 hits and you look through the contact point each time, including your serve if you were serving, you can keep the count going from 4 on the next point, or you can start over. Doesn't matter. What does matter is this. Don't cheat. If you don't look through the contact point, or if you're not entirely certain that you did, and there will be such instances, start over. See if you can get to 50 consecutive hits with your eyes resting on the contact point while the ball is flying towards the net. Once you're satisfied that you are in the habit, stop counting and see whether you keep looking through the contact point without counting. If you don't, start counting again. And don't worry that the counting will distract your attention from the other things you have to do to play a point or cause you to forget the score. It won't. If anything, it will very likely focus your attention and help you concentrate. So that is the first law of consistency. You can adhere to it regardless of your level of play and without changing your strokes. If you're not already doing it, get on a court, try it, and see how it goes. That's it for now. If you found this video helpful, please click the like button below. And if you'd like to see more Crosscourt Rabbit videos, click the subscribe button down to the right of the screen. And I will see you next time when I'll present the second law of consistency. It has to do with clearing the net. Until then, keep playing the greatest of all games.